Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Um, so I'm very happy to be here. My name is Renata Azevedo Moreira. I am Head of Cultural Affairs of Ireland in Canada. And welcome to Taking Space, Making Space, Women in the Arts, Creativity, Strength, and Ongoing Challenges. It's a pleasure to have you here. I want to extend a special welcome to our artists who have agreed so kindly to join me for this conversation. Ois O'Donoghue, Mary Watson, iskwē, and Jinoos Taghizadeh. So in order to start, I'd like to start by saying that as we virtually gather here from many different places, I want to acknowledge that the Consulate-General of Ireland in Toronto is based on the traditional territories covered by Treaty 13, lands and waters that belong to the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, and the Wendat peoples. We're grateful to them and to many other First Nations, Inuit and Métis folks for taking care of these lands and waters since time immemorial. As settlers and visitors in Northern Turtle Island, we are committed to decolonizing our practices here. This is a continuing engagement that includes acknowledging Indigenous traditions, respecting their protocols, and I think that most importantly, learning from Indigenous respectful relationship with humans, nature, and the environment that surrounds us. So today we're here to celebrate St. Brigid's Day. This is an important Celtic festival that marks the halfway point between the winter solstice and the equinox, and it is the first public holiday in Ireland named after a woman. I want to introduce everyone to our Consul-General of Ireland in Toronto, Janice McCann, who is going to say a few words about this day.
Hi to everybody. Thanks very much, Renata. Thanks very much to all of our panelists and everybody who's joining us. Yes, St. Brigid's Day is a public holiday since last year for anybody who didn't know. So happy St. Brigid's Day, Lá Fhéile Bríde. And while it's only the second year of the public holiday, this time of year has been celebrated in Ireland for centuries, if not for millennia, in many different ways. Whether it's one of our patron saints, Saint Brigid, a Celtic saint, or the Celtic goddess Brigid, or Imbolc, which is one of the Celtic quarter days in the calendar that marks the turning from winter into spring, from darkness into light and into new life. And even before St. Brigid's Day became a public holiday, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been taking this opportunity to celebrate the creativity and the leadership of women across the globe. And this is the first St. Brigid's Day event that the Consulate in Toronto will have, because we're quite new in Toronto. And I'm really delighted that we have such a panel of distinguished women with us today to celebrate St. Brigid's Day. And I'm really looking forward to hearing all of your stories, your experiences, your insights, the challenges that you have faced, and also your leadership and your achievements, because that's an important part of St. Brigid's Day, acknowledging the contribution and the leadership of women. And that's not to deny the challenges that many women face across the world, but it's to acknowledge that hearing about the contributions of women and their leadership, that is one of the challenges in and of itself. So it's very important that we hear your stories, that we tell stories of leadership by women, and that as women we can tell our own stories, and we have that space. So thank you very much again to the panel, to everyone who's with us today, and I'll hand back to Renata now.
Thank you so much, Janice. Okay, so just a little bit of explaining of how we're gonna conduct our time together today. So our conversation is going to last about 1 hour, and then we're going to have some time reserved in the end for questions from anyone and everyone. Please ask questions. We're here for that. And At that point, everyone is free to unmute themselves and ask questions. But during the talk, if you want to make questions in the format of comments in the comment section area, please feel free to write your questions down, and we're gonna respond all of them in the end. I ask everyone to please keep comments and the tone of our conversation in a very, very respectful way. We're here to celebrate women and to have a fruitful and respectful discussion. And yeah, so I invite everyone to put your Zoom on speaker mode, because then you're gonna see all of the pinned panelists. Otherwise, if you put it on gallery mode on the top right of your screen, you're gonna see everyone who is in the meeting. Up to you. This meeting is being recorded, just for information as well. Okay, great. So let's start. I'm excited. Okay, so I think that the first thing that I would love to do is to introduce you to our audience who is here today. So I'd like to invite each of you to just introduce who you are personally and professionally, and say a little bit of where you are in the world, what matters most to you right now, and if possible, talk a little bit about your connections to whether Canada or Ireland or both. Why don't we start by Mary?
Okay, hi. So I am Mary Watson and I'm a writer. I'm originally from South Africa, but I've been living in Ireland for the last 15 years. And I'm absolutely delighted to be part of this event, particularly because Canada has a really special place in my heart. It's the place where my great-grandmother and her family lived until she died a few months short of her 100th birthday. And apparently you get a letter from some special letter when you turn 100 in Canada. Anyways, she was 3 months short of her 100th birthday when she died. And also my older sister moved there when I was 10 years old. So whenever I visit her in Mississauga, it always feels like home. So it is a place that I have a very strong connection to. And I'm a fiction writer. Over the last 20 years, I've written quite a diverse range of books, including short stories and novels. I started out writing literary fiction, but I made the move to genre fiction about 10 years ago. So I write for adults, but I also write for young adults. Now, this might be pretty messy for the unfortunate publicist who has to attempt some kind of coherent branding on me, but at the same time, this is what is true to me. I've always been guided by the principle of write the book that you want to read. And that, considering also that when writers write books, we have to read them about maybe 575 times before it's published. So you need to make sure you really are writing the book that you want to read, because you certainly are going to read it. What I most love in a book is a good story, one that makes you ask, and then what happened? And that's basically what I want to evoke in my readers, is that permanent question of, and then what happened? And then what happened? I also am really fascinated by emotion and manipulating emotion in readers and manipulating emotions in my characters. So for me, there is no greater compliment than somebody saying to me, oh, your book made me cry, or your book made me laugh, or your book made me feel something. And I think that ability to make somebody feel something is just really, really precious. I'm also seemingly unable to write a book that doesn't explore something, probe something, ask questions. So at one level, you might be reading a book about a girl who has been cursed to die young, which is the topic of Blood to Poison, my most recent book. But at another level, you're reading a book about the legacy of slavery in South Africa. I've dreamed of becoming a writer ever since I was a young child, and it makes me endlessly grateful that I get to spend my days writing. I'm currently in the early stages of my 8th book, and each time I start again, it's both frightening and absolutely exhilarating.
Thank you so much, Mary. Jinoos.
So, need, yeah. Okay. Happened with my microphone?
We can hear you well.
Okay, great. I'm happy to be invited to this meeting. Thank you. I am an Iranian multidisciplinary artist, and I live in Toronto from last year. And over the past 30 years, I've professionally experienced in various mediums, from theater, screenplay, essay writing, painting, drawing, sculpting, to video art, installation, and performance art. Actually, I'm kind of artist who's not loyal to any specific art form. Every idea and concept finds its own medium, and I discover my medium accordingly. In general, I view myself as a storyteller, and I find a way to tell every story. These stories could relate it to my personal experience and political and social concern, or shed light on some micro narratives that shape macro histories. I'm also known as an activist, critic, and journalist, and try to push boundaries in different ways as much as I can. I am delighted that my art has taken me to different parts of the world where I have showcased my artwork. Sometimes I feel like I've lived years in my suitcase. One of my most valuable experiences was 1 year art residency in Ireland, where I won the Avalon Art Prize, and I was in residence at the Royal Hibernian Academy. I spent time in Dublin, where I fell in love with this amazing and inspiring city, and then spent 2 months in Cork at the Guest House Art Centre. Getting to know Ireland and all of experiences has been a unique journey, really, that I believe has had significant impact on my artworks. During my stay in Dublin, I published a book titled Non-Dubliners, which was a coloring book for adults. It included 40 short stories and 40 drawings for coloring, all about non-Dubliners individuals such as myself in Dublin.
Amazing. Ois, please.
Yes, hi. God, who am I? That's the hardest question to ever answer. It's like the terrible job interview question. I suppose, yeah, so I'm an interdisciplinary theater maker. And I suppose I'm most interested in kind of work that plays with medium and genre, the bounds of that. I really actually like hear what Jinoos is saying in terms of, I think, ultimately the story finds the medium more so than working specifically in a medium. I think it's so interesting at that level. So I'm really interested in operating on the bounds of that. I am probably most known for my most recent play, which is called Hyper, which is a deep dive into hyperpop, the music genre, and the relationship of trans femininity to that. If you don't know hyperpop, think of when Cher sings I Believe and her voice goes all the way up and all the way down. It's exactly that. And I think, it's a beautiful kind of way and lens to look at femininity as presented through the voice and the way it can be manipulated, the way it's naturally read, and the way it's naturally heard. I'm also the founder of the arts collective Jack's Banded Theatre, and we work to create work that is kind of originating from a broken, fractured place and looking to find some kind of coalescence in it. It was founded during COVID, so I think we were very much feeling the artifice of that. So Banjack or Jack's Banded is a bastardized anagram of the word Banjax, which is, a colloquialism for something that is broken down without any hope of repair. And I think in trying to put together the word in a new way, we hope to kind of create work that is brought back together in a new way. And yeah, I suppose my Canadian link, if I was to have one, was that actually I feel like I've experienced a lot of kind of Canadian life through my mother's best friend, God bless, who works within the Canadian Embassy in Dublin. So I feel like I'm always getting kind of the experience via her of constantly going back and forth to Toronto and what that's like. So God bless, I wish I had more, but that is currently my Canadian link. And I'm really hoping in the future, I've just worked on a new show called The King of All Birds. And we're really hoping in the future to hopefully get a chance to bring that to Canada. So yes.
I hope so. Iskwē, please.
Tanse, Nino Mawasisquan Iskwē. My name in my language is Wasisquan Iskwē, which translates into English as Blue Sky Woman. I use iskwē as my moniker for art, and my English name is Megan Meisters. I'm Cree-Metis on my mother's side, which is Indigenous to Canada, and I am uncertain on my father's side, but I believe that there's some pretty solid ties to Ireland through there, which have actually led me to spend a lot of time over the years exploring the country, pieces where I have been told that I have ancestors from his father, and so on. So it's a place that has rooted itself deep in my heart. Over the years, I've actually spent a lot of time in the West Coast specifically. And I'm technically a recording artist. I would call myself more of a performing artist. I build productions that are rooted in music primarily. So I write songs fundamentally, but which seems to be the link here is that I also create in different mediums as well that I blend into performance. So I come from a solid dance background primarily. I danced ballet and contemporary for about 900 years, and then shifted into music in my 20s when I realized that I didn't have the chops to make it as a professional dancer, but didn't want to give up on dance altogether. So I became a musician so that I could still dance on stage. And I've been lucky enough to travel the world with music. It's been pretty exceptional for the experiences of being able to share stories and also experiences with other artists that I've met along the way. It's taken me through North America, Europe, to Japan, and yeah, it's interesting. We'll as the conversation goes forward, I'll touch on some of the different pieces on what's circling through my brain at the moment. But the idea of being a woman that has created a bit, created a job for myself in a passion that is deeply rooted, I think is something that we can all attest to is very, very difficult to do, to maintain, and to find our footing along the way. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm honored to be chatting with all of you who are doing such incredible work in our independent fields. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And this was the only question where I'm like assigning people because I wanted everyone to speak. I'm not going to do that anymore. So please decide the order on which you're going to go. And of course, everyone, all of you, of the four of you are invited to answer these questions that I'm proposing. But if any of you doesn't want to answer, that is completely fine, up to you. So I think that the first question that I wanted to propose is about personal challenges and struggles of being a woman specifically in the arts, but not only in the arts, I think in the world as well. I'm thinking about each of your specific fields. Everyone is very multidisciplinary, which is great, but primarily you work in different fields. Literature, visual arts, performing arts, divided into dance, music, theater. And I wanted to invite you to talk a little bit about important challenges that you faced in your careers and lives being a woman?
Is this just a roll with it when you have a thought? Yeah, okay. I just for some context, I have had to create myself as a record label. So I run as an artist, but I'm also an incorporated record label. And I had to do that, an independent label. I had to do that in order to be able to have a job as a musician, because the hurdles that I experienced along the way, over the years, my art has been fundamentally quite active and in support of indigeneity and a lot of the raising awareness in the best way that I could or knew how with regards to how Indigenous people are being treated in North America. And one of the things that I found along the way was that made me a bit untouchable by a lot of other companies and labels, in that they would show up to my shows, but nobody would ever want to sign me. You know, they would support me from afar, but nobody ever wanted to actually take what I was doing and support it in a way that could make it bigger, you know? So I had to go and start it myself and then run it myself. I've since established a team of incredible people a la carte that I've selected over the years who do things like publicity and so on. But again, you know, even though I am about to release my 5th record, it's all been through my own company, through my own doing.
Mm.
And one of the things that I've noticed in this is that the feedback, the unintentional feedback that I've received along the way has been really rooted in you know, things like my art was too aggressive, you know, so it wouldn't be placed on mainstream radio because the content that I was talking about was to raise awareness, as an example, on missing and murdered Indigenous women. At no point in the lyrics of the song do I even say those words. It's a very, you know, all of my music, all of my art is quite metaphorical. However, the promotion around it has been rooted in conversations around violence against women, and specifically Indigenous women. And so it, you know, the feedback that would come back to me would be in using words like too aggressive, you know, and so on, as to why I wasn't being played on mainstream radio, why I wasn't, you know, being accepted into mainstream audiences and so on. And I was like, okay, well, interesting. You know, and I would sit back and watch, my male counterparts just skyrocket and can, you know, watch their careers just blow up, even though they're doing similar stuff. You know, and I'm like, why does this happen? Why is it that when these conversations are coming from us, it results in a whole different story? You know, it results in a whole different reception. Then you fast forward a bunch of years, and in my community specifically, we have this new term that has started to roll across our community across North America, which is this term called being a pretendian. That is somebody who is falsely identifying as being an Indigenous person for the sake of financial gain or career gain, great gain, or whatnot. And this has become a term that is extremely violent. It's extremely quick to spread like wildfires. And it's also mainly targeting Indigenous women or women within the community. So we've had some people who have unfortunately done this act where they have in fact pretended to be Indigenous for the sake of financial or career gains, but the majority of people being accused and run through the mud on the internet and social media are women. And so these are the things that I'm watching, and I was also one of the people that was brutalized online with this attack, and it was soul shattering, and it was, you know, I'm still recovering from it, both spiritually and financially, right? And now it's happening to somebody else that I know and love. And so when I look at these things and I look at the challenges and I look at, the way I've been treated in the music industry in Canada, the way I've been treated in the Indigenous community in Canada, the way I've been treated in just sort of any of those spaces, the ones who are very quick to throw you aside or to try and wipe you out tend to be the ones that are closest. And this is a thing that I'm finding interesting in this day, like in this moment in time, but also that it's happening majority to our women. And when I see this and when I watch this and when I look at the men in my community, in the music industry community, in the Indigenous community, and I see the way they are not supporting us when we're the ones that are taking the brunt of this online violence and the, all of these different attacks and so on, I'm curious as to how it continues, how this seems to be the place that we circle through and we all acknowledge it, we all see it, and nobody wants to say anything about it. Or if they do, it just sort of like disappears very quickly. But it's like there's the bro code, the homie code, and I've watched so many of my male counterparts, like I said, both in music and in Indigenous community, and the two, like once they're all intertwined, the Indigenous music community, and it's just like the same all the time, every year. And I've been in this industry now for over 20 years, and it hasn't changed. It just has a different, a different slide, I guess. So I don't know, maybe I'm a pessimist, maybe I'm a realist. I don't know what I'm at, but it's difficult. It's heartbreaking. I don't know what the other side looks like. If I look at history and I look at how much women have to fight for our place constantly, whether it be in our industries, whether it be in our financial movement, whether it's from career, whatever, wherever it might be, it's just an upward struggle all the time. And then, when you stand up for these things, they come for you in different ways, and they come for you from all over the place. And so for me, my question ends up being, well, how do we protect ourselves from this? How do we protect ourselves from losing everything quickly that we've been building and that we've been, really trying to create for ourselves, our families, our loved ones, our, to spread back into the community. And so I don't know. I don't sit in this negative space in my day to day, but just in this conversation, it's a difficult question, for me in a very, it hits me in my heart because it's something that has been very recent. My attack was very recent, so it's something that sits right on the top of my brain still, and I haven't talked about it publicly yet. So these are kind of the things, and to give you a bit of insight as to why this is where my mind has gone when you ask this question.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it, iskwē. I'm sure it's hard for all of us, but specifically the situation. Does anyone have something to add or to, Jinoos?
As a woman artist in general, the most challenging thing we, I think, constantly face throughout our career journey is the need to keep proving ourselves. It is necessary to continually prove that you are an artist, creative, and desire to pursue this as a profession. Even after 30 years of professional experience, the path of constant validation doesn't end. It's a corrosive challenge that takes a lot of time and energy. It's like the myth of Sisyphus. Every time, with every project, you roll that stone up the mountain, and if you slack off or take a moment to analyze your work or figure out your professional situation, the stone roll back down and you have to lift it up again. The migration situation is like 2 stones for roll up, but it isn't our topic of discussion right now. I remember meeting a well-known art historian in Iran at a gallery. a few years ago after a long time. He said, "Wow, Jinoos, it's been a while since I last met you. Are you still engaged in art?" I suppose it's a question I've never asked of a man who has been a professional artist for over 2 decades. If he hasn't heard from him in a while, he would inquire about the new projects he's engaged in that haven't been widely publicized. When I mentioned his incorrect question, he seemed embarrassed and provided a response that was even more foolish than his initial question. He apologized, stating that as women get older, they become more involved with their families. Not only was his response sexist, but it is also exhibited ageism. And we are well aware of this toxic combination of ageism and sexism toward women. When a man grows older, he regarded as a master, while a woman facing the same fate is bombarded with this foolish question to prove herself for the thousandth time. This blend of sexism and ageism takes a specific form when it comes to young female artists. The best example of this for me is in my mind is thinking about Marina Abramovich's 1975 performance. In that performance, she violently brushed her hair and said, "Art must be beautiful. Artists must be beautiful." This combination becomes even more pronounced in different ways when the age of a female artist increases. But prove yourself is the key code every time. The scope of this validation is even more extensive, especially in the art market. The attitude and mindset of that art historian is commonly held by collectors, gallery owners, art auction houses, art fairs, and it is even more exaggerated. They invest less in works of a female artist because a female artist always has to prove to them that she wants to remain an artist and their investment will not go to waste. Another challenge we are well acquainted with is related to the topics and themes that seemingly expect us as women to address. They expect us to address about special topics. It's as if a human concepts are male-centric, and as female artists, we are only supposed to discuss the aspects related to our gender. This situation especially is more complicated and exaggerated when you come from the Middle East or non-Western countries. You constantly have to reflect the sexualized exotism in your artwork, or a kind of victimizing women and just talk about trauma related to gender and your geography. This is a wave you continually encounter, and resisting against it is very challenging because the art market and the prevailing economic conditions in it, along with curators, critics, juries of grants and funds, consistently push you to that direction. But I intend to shift the focus from challenges faced by women artists about expected themes and subject to another aspect. I want to discuss about some kind of support for women artists through exhibitions and grants, especially dedicated to women. Something that might be considered positive discrimination, given the historical discrimination against women. I question whether is this new form of isolating women and women's art, thus providing this privilege, risk of excluding women artists from the general art scene, especially the art market? This is a question that always occupies my mind. Maybe we can categorize two sides of market for artists in general, in general, not just for women. First, private, like collectors and art fairs and private galleries, which mostly expect some kind of sexy, exotic, flashy art from women artists, a kind of neoliberal feminism approaches. The second, governmental and institutional, which I call it target support. What we commonly witness is a growing trend in targeted support, where funds aim to align with specific themes or issues. While these themes may seem very humanistic, very great themes, they ultimately direct artists toward specific genres and divert them from their own real concern. Exhibition focusing on women, children, immigrants, queer communities, etc. It could be great for promotion of public culture, but on the other hand, could be a phenomenon that I call it cultural railing or cultural rail tracking. Maybe these are contemporary equivalents of same mentality that in history we remember from churches and mosque. They support artists to make art for the ideological purposes. And now the subject changed, probably in good way. If church as ideological institution with capital openly and explicitly utilized art as their purpose, while the current dilemma we face involves contradiction in policies and budget management for artists and cultural activities, which sometimes contradict with is happening within real society. A capitalist institution with their prideful gesture of supporting women talent or women artists have placed themselves in a queue of intellectual atmosphere, not showing equality in gender representation and right within their organization. The granting of privilege by capital institution has made it easier and more cost-effective to stifle radical feminist movements. Sometimes these institutions have realized that by supporting a limited number of female artists each year and exhibiting their work, they can mask their own discrimination practices within their organization. In a world full of discrimination about women, we don't criticize the artwork which showcased about or from female artists because we don't want to lose these minimal supports and showcases. So in two parallel sides, we can see some exotic and flashy artworks in the art market scene and some everything correct curated shows in another side. But I'm asking, aren't these two sides working in parallel to neutralize the art of women? I can remember the last time I saw a bone-shaking, radical, and creatively rich and truly impactful art from female artists, what that was. So I can only ask myself a question and strive to both preserve my own survival and my art survival while remaining aware of whom and for what reason support or doesn't support me as a female artist. From the Middle East, actually, especially from Middle East, and what expectation they have from me. I must consistently be aware of where I stand as a woman artist And this always being aware is so complicated and challenging.
Yeah. Thank you, Jinoos. I'll just intervene here to invite actually Mary to talk, just because I remember in our pre-conversation before this live chat, Mary had said something that was similar to what Jinoos was saying about the issues of tokenism and how some subjects are to be explored by women only, or women authors should deal with certain subjects that are considered appropriate. Like, I don't know if you want to expand on that, Mary. I think you're muted. Yes.
Yeah, I think, it comes down to expectations, what's expected from different writers, and from male writers, and from female writers, but also I think that just to sort of get back, to take a few steps back from that, one of the biggest and surprising challenges for me has personally been this sort of strange divide between art and commerce. And I'm going to answer your question in a very roundabout way. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is just this really weird position that you inhabit when you're creating art that gets sold. Because what happens when you're writing a book or whatever it is you're doing is that you're writing for somebody else. I mean, whenever you're writing a book, if you're planning to publish it, you're writing it for somebody else. But publishing is first and foremost a business. So when you write a book and sell that book, it becomes a product. And if you're lucky, you become a brand. And there's a whole team of people that's dedicated to this process of selling the product. And this is a fraught thing for very many reasons. In terms of marketing, in terms of customer satisfaction, even simply in terms of how a woman author is viewed by the public and by the industry. And I think that what sometimes happens is that female authors particularly get claimed by the public. And if you look at some of the fandoms that have become toxic, there are, I don't particularly want to mention names, but there are some women authors who've done, who have done wonderfully, have written books which have gotten huge fandoms that have sprung up. But the simultaneous abuse that these women authors get is not the same as what you find with men. So like an author like George R. Martin does not get the same level of abuse of his equivalent female in terms of best-selling author. So I think also just in terms of how things are marketed and where the money goes, women get caught short in more ways than one. And I can't talk to you about exactly how proportionate marketing budgets work, but I remember a few years ago looking at the New York Times bestselling list. And at the time, why young adult fiction still is mostly written by women, but on that list, about 7 out of 10 of them were male authors. And how does that happen? That in a field where most of the writers are actually women, you get 7 out of 10 of the writers on the New York Times bestselling list, isn't it? It doesn't make sense. So how do you get a situation like that? And I think what it comes down to is kind of questions of respect. Like if women are writing about certain things, they might not get the same respect that men necessarily do. I remember asking a woman writer many years ago if she found it difficult, this was in a panel discussion, if she found it difficult to kind of get taken seriously, because a lot of her writing was about domestic scenes, about writing about family, writing about children, writing about love. And she was a very good, very literary writer, but she chose to focus on domestic subjects. Her answer was absolutely, men could, and now excuse me because I'm quoting her directly, she said, men can write about wanking and shouting about their mothers and they will get all the respect. Whereas a woman sitting down and writing about family, about the difficulties of raising children, this is considered kind of as domestic, it's considered lesser. And so just in terms of the topic, it becomes less marketable. So that we come back to that question of art and commerce. and what is considered more marketable and what is considered less marketable. And when you have kind of the hard-hitting subjects about hating your mother or swearing or being a professor who gets his young girlfriend, like all those, tried and tested topics that male authors have written about. And, even like I suppose if female writers wrote about the same thing, it wouldn't have the same response. But there's a different level of what is expected of women in terms of what they're writing. There's a different level of respect. And I think that's kind of the bottom line of what it comes down to. Also, just like in terms, I don't read my own reviews, but like sometimes you get tagged in them. And it occurred, like, I don't know who tags people in bad reviews, but it happens. And I've had readers tag me in bad reviews where they try to correct me. And the idea of somebody who, I don't know how old they are, I don't know what they do with their lives, but they're not a professional person in the publishing industry. And I have been, doing this for 20 years. And somebody tagging me in a bad review, trying to tell me how to do it better is remarkable, because I don't think that a man would get that kind of response. I don't think a man would get tagged in a review like that. So there's this idea that people feel that they can teach me, and I'm sure color comes into that as well. People feel that they can teach me how to do my job better, but I suspect that doesn't happen to men. I was in a green room. Was last year or the year before, and I was sitting backstage with a bunch of really high-profile writers, and we were all women. And one of them started talking about imposter syndrome, and we were kind of all having a laugh about that. And the other one is like, oh yeah, I still have imposter syndrome. And another one is like, I have imposter syndrome. And I looked at them and I said, do you think Dan Brown gets imposter syndrome? And we all kind of had a big laugh about that, because no, I doubt very much that Dan Brown gets imposter syndrome, but somehow we do, despite experience, despite sales, despite whatever, we still do.
Thanks, Mary. Do you want to follow up on something, Ois?
Yeah, it's interesting how you talk about reviews and correction, where it immediately spoke to me, where I had a recent review of my play that misgendered me, and the play is about kind of being a trans woman. And I got in contact and I was like, hey, this is the case. I'm the writer of the play, and also I perform in the play. This is what it's about. And they said that I didn't understand my play, which I thought was a fun angle, considering I was in it, and that I was wrong about that. So I think there's an interesting idea there, as well, in terms of like the idea we were talking about a second ago of like commerce and tokenism, the way they can kind of tie together sometimes. I find it really interesting in the arts, especially, and in theatre in Ireland, how a lot of theatres here want the credit of putting on queer and trans work, but they don't necessarily want the backlash of putting on trans work featuring trans women. And I think the reason that is roots back to misogyny. Because fundamentally, so in the last kind of few years here, there's been some trans work on mainstream Irish stages, and all of the trans work is focused on trans men primarily. And I think the reason that is because to aspire towards masculinity is viewed as, a kind of honorable, noble thing that could be understood within a patriarchal framework. But to aspire towards femininity is viewed as, kind of pathetic and vaguely prejudicial. And I think as a result, in the tokenism sense, a lot of theatres want that idea of, kind of being progressive and being trans forward and trans focused, without actually owning a lot of that sense. And I think fundamentally a lot of that roots into the idea of misogyny, which is, I think, interesting in that sense. And it spoke to me with the idea of that review of somebody both telling me that I didn't understand my own work, I didn't understand who I was, and it was a man saying it, and it was this interesting idea.
Yeah. Thank you for being so candid, all of you. I think there are so many very urgent and important themes to talk about, and it's interesting to see how all of these conversations, the themes that we see. This is the first time that the Consulate-General of Ireland in Toronto is hosting a conversation like this. We have only been here for 1 year, but it seems like there's little change, right? And from one year to the next. So that brings me to my other question, which I don't think we're gonna be able to respond to all of them. Maybe we come back in the end, but faced with all of these challenges, struggles, and I want to put it this way, disadvantages, I don't know if that's the proper word, of being a woman working in the arts. Is there another side? Is there something about our femininity that makes us powerful and relentless? And I hesitate to put this binary distinction between women and men, although it's normal, we tend to do that, but I want to say more than men, is there something in our feminine nature and in your work within yourselves? Do you think that there's something that you were only able to do because you were a woman? And I'm opening space here and room for us to do something that we do very rarely, which is celebrate our achievements and accomplishments. And I wanted to give you room to think about that and discuss how maybe being a woman enhances your practice as an artist, is important for your practice as an artist. And if there's one specific accomplishment that you're proud of and wanted to share, I wanted to give us the space to do that as well. Who wants to start?
I think I don't know. Like, I think the thing for me is the friendships that I have with other women who are, building their own lives, right? Like building career, building their success stories. And for me, it's the moments that we realize that we have to do more together to hold ourselves up and to hold each other up. I have a few different WhatsApp chat groups with my lady friends, like different batches where, the general messaging across all of them is we just support each other. Some of them are more funny than others. One of them is more about financial freedom. One of them is more about, like what concert are we going to go to, so it's less about specific career in the arts. That's not the topic in those conversations. But the thing that I've noticed is that we've created these groups as a way to be like, look, we need to celebrate our wins, and we're raised to downplay them for whatever reason. We're raised that maybe it's too arrogant to say this, maybe it's too boastful, maybe it's too blah blah blah, whatever it is. And so then when we have a win, it's easy to just skirt right over it and be like, oh, but now I have to go and get back out there and accomplish this next thing. And you forget to celebrate that you just launched this massive milestone. And so when I'm in my group of lady friends, they don't let me forget, and I don't let them forget, and we don't let each other forget. And I think that that's something that my heart really relies on, is being able to turn to these groups of friends and see that we have that. And I don't think that that's unique to women, but I think that the way we, like I personally feel confident that men have similar things, but it's not rooted in the same reason, and it's not rooted in the same, like they don't get there for the same reasons that we get there. We turn to each other because it's just like, gosh, like we really need to, you know? And so, yeah, that's something for me that's a really big positive that feels special and awesome. And I'm grateful for.
I love the dance. I think it's the same thing for me. I think the thing my art really benefits from being a woman is kind of recognizing my place in community, and also recognizing my place in the continuum of women that I have existed in and then continue to exist in. I think for me, especially, like, theater fundamentally is an event. It's something, you know, we put on together in kind of this communal sharing fashion. And that's something I think in my kind of, because we work in collaborative groups with me. And I think that's something I've tried to model very much off of after the way, you know, my mother and her sisters would have run events when we were younger, you know, be that celebrations at Christmas time or be that birthdays. They ran these kind of beautiful communal events in a collaborative fashion. And I think that's something that I try to model a lot of the way I create work on. And, you know, I operate within a fully female design team, and we kind of are able to tackle problems in a way that feels very communal again, which maybe is not unique to women, but feels unique within kind of the continuum that I recognize myself existing in as a woman.
So I have this thing that I conceptualize to myself in a particular way, and I call it the witch inside. And this is not that I believe that I've got a witch living inside my head, but that there is this kind of sense, you know, when you walk outside and you kind of feel the fresh air on your face, and maybe there's mist or maybe there's rain coming down and it's all very soft, and the green of the trees is alive and electric, and the air is just kind of fizzling around you, and you get that feeling inside you, and you just know that you have to get back inside and you've got to go and get your works done because they're coming in, and they're coming really fast, and you've got to get. And or when you go outside and you feel the grass under your feet, and it's just basically the sense of something that's just kind of awakening inside you. And I don't know what it is, but I call it the witch inside. And basically, when that witch inside kind of speaks to me, that's where the words come from. That's where the stories come from. And that's where you go and you put them down. And that's, so I don't know. I don't think it's some kind of innate femininity that does it necessarily, but it's how I conceptualize it, is that idea of the witch that's inside my own wildness, my own 16-year-old self who still lives there, who goes dancing barefoot in the rain or whatever, and is open and wants to just kind of be open to whatever it is that's kind of out there that feeds art. So that's my answer anyways.
That's so beautifully said. That's why we have an author here, everyone. Jinoos, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I think maybe power of observation is something that is very important about women. Maybe during the history, always men talk and people watch, and the women watch. And this is a powerful thing that I think if I was not a woman, maybe I didn't have it. And I really, sometimes I don't make an artwork, but this observation inside my mind and my eye, it's something unique that I really enjoy that. And I want to add to your comment about working with women. When I work with another women artist, it's very great because it's not like competition. It's like running together beside somewhere. You run because running is good for health, because weather is great. You're just running without competition. And this is very great feeling that I feel as a woman artist.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you so much. I want to ask the other question that I had, and this is just for if anyone wants to respond, and then we're going to open up to questions from the audience. But I've tried to assemble a group of diverse women, not only trans women, cis women, women of color, indigenous women. And I think that this is important for us to be as multicultural and plural as possible and try to give a accurate understanding of what being a woman is in its multiplicity. And I wanted to ask about this minority within the minority, right? So being a trans person or a person of color within the reality of being a woman. Does anyone want to talk about how that impact their work? Yeah.
Just to say that there's a part of me that feels resentful about it. It feels resentful about being boxed into a certain kind of boxed in by expectations, I suppose. I am, every time I start a book, my first question to myself is, well, where is it set? Okay, so if it's going to be set in South Africa, then there's a whole host of things that need explanation that I just simply don't want to have to explain. And if I set it in Ireland, then there's going to be another question about, well, why is your well, okay, fine, great. So is your main character what race? Why is your main character not white? And it just feels like there's always these explanations that I need to give in order to present my main character. Like, I think I am 100% sure that if I were to just kind of present some kind of mixed race character, whatever, I will have, if not my editor, somebody asking questions. Well, where's she from? Where's her background? Who's the father? Where does they come from? What other country? And like, I don't want to have to answer that question all the time. To be honest, I don't want to have to deal with identity in any shape and form within my books. I'd much rather be exploring other things like adultery or entrapment or obsession or demon possession or whatever. Identity is not. Sorry. Identity is absolutely not what I want to be exploring as a primary theme. Like, sure, it emerges in various ways or whatever. When you're writing, there's absolutely questions around that has emerged in my books, but it's not my primary concern at all. And I just feel that there is always this expectation, and if not expectation, fear. I remember a long time ago, I was speaking to an agent, not my own agent, but a different agent, who was saying to me, yeah, but I don't think that would sell because they already had a South African like a month ago. And it's like, well, so there's a quota, and you just feel that there is this, there's a certain appetite for otherness that is acceptable. And once you surpass that appetite, once you surpass those limits, everything else is extra. And I think this kind of links back to something that was said earlier, in that it almost feels like one or two Black writers might be celebrated and put into the space, and everybody else just kind of falls like way under the radar because all the attention is just like set up in celebrating that one or two, rather than making any kind of real substantial change. But at the end of the day, like, I think, we just got to keep going, and I'm going to keep writing about demons or whatever, entrapment, obsession, and I'm just going to keep going about it that way. And I'm going to write my characters with as little explanation as I can get away with. And, hopefully appetites. And this also goes back to what I was saying earlier about art and product, because there is that difference between customer and reader, because they are both, readers are customers as well. They've spent their hard-earned money buying this book. And so there is that sort of like, well, there is, when customers are not, or when readers not happy, there are customers who aren't happy. So but I can't, as a writer, worry about that at the same time. So yeah, I just think that at the end of the day, I just have to do what I can do, and that is to basically just write the stories that I want to write without having to be boxed in. by race as much as I can.
It almost sounds like an extra layer of labor by what you're saying.
Exactly. It is an extra layer of labor, constant extra layer of labor. I have never written an epic fantasy, but I almost want to write an epic fantasy just so that I don't have to deal with like the locations in the real world and real race and any of these real issues.
Yeah, iskwē.
It also feels like a way for us to just continually stay boxed in and fighting each other for the scraps and having us be convinced that there aren't enough seats at the table. And so we remove each other, like we fight amongst ourselves. And then that way we do the work ourselves by like getting rid of so-and-so in the competition for, the one spot at the table for the South African, the one spot at the table for the Iranian, the one spot at the table for the trans person, the one spot at the table for the indigenous person, like we it's like, I'm sorry, but there's a bazillion people on this planet and we all satisfy all of these different boxes all over the place. So why do we think that there's only a select number of seats? Because they tell us that, and we take that information and then we allow that to be what exists. And then when we fight against it and we create our own spaces, I don't know. To me, it just feels like we're just constantly being pushed into this spot rather than being able to just be like, okay, fine, and then do it, and then we end up doing it ourselves or whatever, and then it's a whole different path and a whole different thing, and it's just like endless.
I think on that as well, like I feel that deeply where a lot of, Ireland is small and the population of trans people is smaller. And we me and like the few trans theatre maker friends that I have, we would often talk when we apply for, an application for kind of presentation or development or whatever. And we would always talk about like how, well, like they'll take one of us, like best of luck, and it just become this weird internal battle where it's like, it's not ultimately, kind of, your kind of broad accreditation and your broad quality versus the populace. It's like your broad quality versus each other. And it becomes like this set up internal fight, which is like a bizarre phenomenon where it doesn't serve to, bring you into kind of the table, as you say, more so like it serves to like fight for one seat in musical chairs. And like that's kind of where we sit.
And it's on purpose.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Well, I want to, that was amazing. Thank you so much for your very thoughtful and generous and sometimes blunt and sometimes very honest answers. I really appreciate it. And I wanted to open up for questions. If anyone has questions, I've seen that there are some love and comments in the comment section. But if you who are watching have a question, you are welcome to unmute yourself and ask them right now. And if you want to turn your video on.
Don't be shy.
One at a time, please.
I can ask a question. It's a room full of amazing talent and varied disciplines. What's next for everybody? Self-promotion time, I think.
Love it.
I have a new album coming out in April. So I wrote and recorded this record while I was living in Mexico City during the pandemic. And it's been sitting in my back pocket now, fully finished for 2+ years. And I've started releasing singles as of last April, all for this coming record that will be out this April. And it's called Nina, which is the Cree translation for the word me. So this record was actually, Ironically, I got attacked on the internet twice. And so this record was written in between both attacks. And so it's oddly very responsive to the second one, which is kind of cool because I wrote it unknowing that I was about to have an even worse time. So this record is very much rooted in that, and I'm very proud of it and excited to finally put it out.
Love that. Yes, Jinoos?
Yeah. I'm so new in this city and this country. From last year I'm here. So I just try to figure out how I have to manage everything here. And actually, honestly, art scene in Toronto, in Canada, is really bureaucratic. And I don't know this kind of art scene. Maybe I worked with European art scene more than Iranian art scene, actually. But this kind of just making proposal and try to get found to do something is really complicated for me. But I just try to understand and find a way to this. For me, is exactly, I told about Sisyphus, but I have another metaphor, is like a snake and ladder game. After climbing this ladder, I had that snake, and now again I start everything, and it's really difficult. And this kind of bureaucratic thing is really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So I have a board full of new ideas. Sometimes it's freaky because lots of ideas I write, but I don't know how it's possible here. Maybe I'm so new here.
I'm not in Toronto anymore, but I've been applying for grants in Canada, and I'm in Montreal, and I've also been on the juries for about 8 trillion different ones. So if you need any help or anything like that, I understand this inane
Great.
bureaucracy that we get to work through.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's so nice. It's a restart, right, Jinoos? I get it.
Yeah.
Here too, so I get it.
But yeah, maybe it's difficult to start again. So sometimes I think, okay, I do my thing without thinking about fun, but it's not possible. So I just writing, too much writing in these days.
Yeah. Coming next, Ois and Mary, for you.
Yeah, so it was actually announced today that so I'll be developing a new play with the Percolate program, which is a play development program here. It's called Suplex. It's about the place of trans people in sports as told through the stories of cheese and professional wrestling. And it's going to be very silly, and I'm very excited. So I'll be developing that over the next kind of year, and that'll be my life for a bit.
So I don't think I'm allowed to talk about them just yet in terms of giving out the details, because you're told when you're allowed to talk about these things. But I have 2 books written and revised that are basically on the conveyor belt and, you know, being made from ideas into books. And then, so that should be out this year, next year, hopefully, all things going well. And then I have, I've just had a conversation with my editor this morning, who's green-lighted my next one. So that's really exciting. So I'm just in the process of starting that one up. And I have so much I want to do, and I'm so excited about it. And it was just really great to get the feedback and get the kind of enthusiastic yes, go. So I'm very, very excited about that.
Congratulations to all of you. Janet Smith has raised their hand. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much. I've just been taking lots of notes as I've been listening to everybody having the conversations. I just wonder, I'm not an artist, but I am a festival programmer, and I work primarily with other women, and I work primarily within literature. And so the people within publishing I work with tend to be, on the whole, women. So having heard each of you explain some of the barriers that you continue to bump up against, all I can think of is what are we doing wrong? What is it, the structures that we're all operating within? Do we need to be better at breaking those down and rebuilding them in a way that is supportive of each other? And each of you have spoken so movingly about the communities that you work within and how key that support is to keeping your momentum and building your resilience. So what is it about the wider artistic community when so many of us are women? What are we just not getting? And if you've got thoughts, or if that resonates with you, or reflections, then I'd love to hear them.
Go on, Mary.
This is something that I've thought about a lot. It perplexes me too, absolutely baffles me, because you're right, in publishing, it is mostly women. And in terms of the day-to-day connections, I think that works really well. So for example, you might, if somebody says, oh, I'm sorry, I can't come to the meeting because I have childcare problems, that's not an issue. Like, everybody's fine with that because everybody understands, because, and we might find that after a while we get chatting about children or whatever, and that's fine, and it's great and it's positive. But at the same time, there's something that doesn't quite work at a structural level. And I think it is structural, and I think it's got to do with staffing issues. I think that's one of it. I think it's got to do with who gets employed, who can afford to work in publishing, because that is a whole other ball game, because it is not well paid for the hours that gets put in. And I think that the people who do end up wherever the money goes in publishing, it's not to the people who are actually working on the ground with authors, getting books out, getting sales, books sold. So it baffles me. I don't understand it. I think it is a structural problem, and but I do think on the other hand that at that human emotional level, the support is very much there, and I think that it is there because we're all mostly women. Yeah.
Does anyone want to add anything, or should we go to the next question? Okay. Kelly, go on.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, let me just try and turn on my camera. Cool. Yeah, my question is kind of to bring it back a little bit to, I guess, St. Brigid's Day. And I'm not sure if people are aware, but Brigid is the goddess of poetry traditionally in Ireland. And I guess I'd just like to know, since you've all spent time in Ireland or from Ireland, traditionally arts, and especially poetry, I guess, but all forms of art, like the oral tradition especially, it's very big in Ireland. Like, for example, St. Brigid, it comes from folklore. I was wondering, since you've all spent time in Ireland, is that something that you've noticed, the people who are based in Ireland? Is it something that do you feel you're more supported because arts has such a history, in a traditional history in Ireland, and it's something that is quite promoted, and it's a big industry in Ireland? And the people who kind of work in Canada or elsewhere, have you noticed it more so in Ireland, or do you notice it in other countries as well?
I haven't worked in, oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
Yeah, okay. I haven't worked in Ireland at any point, but it is one of the reasons that I've spent so much time there. It's a very, Mary, you said something about, it made me smile when you said something about feeling the mist and the grass under your feet, and the way you described it, I was like, oh yeah, she definitely lives in Ireland. And it's something that is very, maybe you were speaking about South Africa or some other place, I'm not too sure.
Definitely Ireland, and also the west coast of Ireland.
Okay, exactly. And that's where
Yeah.
I've spent the majority of my time in the country. And I would go there for that reason. I would go there for, you know, just to feel that energy around. It is very different here in Canada. I don't think it has the same creative inspiration. I feel like I'm constantly leaving, and I feel like artists are constantly leaving in order to find inspiration, in order to further their careers, their whatever. So it is absolutely part of why I love your country so much, is that it floats in the sky. You do feel it around. You feel it in the pub when you go in and everybody's playing music. You feel it in when you go and walk through the university campus and you're like, oh man, this is where so and so wrote this great book. Or you feel it in this little cafe that this other great writer used to go and sit at all the time. Like you feel that timelessness, you feel that creative energy, and it is something that is very special and definitely nothing that I've experienced in this country. Canada.
I think something artistically that's very important to me about being an Irish person is kind of growing up in a place where art is clearly valued by people on a kind of individual and communal level. Like in our family, I'm from an enormous, very stereotypical Irish family where there's, 8 siblings on either side, and it's enormous. There's 40 people, and every Stevens's Day, all of us would come together, and one of the requirements to be there is that everyone has to contribute a party piece. So everyone has to do something. If it's sing a song, do a magic trick, tell a story, anything. And, that's I was doing those from the age of 4 or 5. And, it's the idea of instilling this idea early that it's important to contribute and tell stories within a community as a method of kind of preservation and celebration. I think that's really important. I will say it's really interesting. The kind of oral tradition you talked about, Callie, is really interesting because it's had in theatre specifically this fascinating side effect where I learned kind of during my master's degree and by working with a lot of Italian theatre makers that Ireland is kind of known basically as being very playwrighter centric. So the playwriter is kind of God in Ireland, which is interesting because in kind of Italian theatre and European theatre, it's all based in the body. Words come last. Words are like the thing that's layered on like it's music. And they have a tradition which is more heavily based in like movement and the body and the soul. Whereas like Ireland is very much an artistic tradition. I think that's driven by linguistics and driven by language and specifically the oral tradition. So it's had this interesting side effect where Ireland specifically is kind of like jettisoned from the European theatrical tradition, which is fascinating, I think.
I just, when I moved here, I thought to myself, how dare you? How dare I? How dare I come to this country, this small country that has had so many great authors in it, and how dare I go there and like become a writer there? And yeah, it is there is the most amazing tradition here, and there's also wonderful mythology and stories. And when I wrote the Wren Hunt, I very much drew on and made up my own Irish mythology, which included drawing on St. Brigid's Day. And in the story, I ended up making these for the launch. I don't know if you can see it. This is very old and very broken. Little brie jokes, little St. Brigid's that I made. I made about 30 of them for my book launch. So in the book anyways, this kind of walks around and kind of disturbs the main character. But yeah, there's my little brie joke for St. Brigid's Day.
I love it. I want one.
No. I didn't know about St. Brigid before, but during 1 year living in Dublin, I experienced for first time some people around me with very smart sense of humor, with humbleness and a kind of dignity that is very unique. And you can feel this esprit in everywhere in the city. In European cities, in middle of city, in a square, you can see some glorious and horse and something like that, very glory. But in the in Dublin, in middle of the city, in a square, you can see a sculpture, a journalist with open hand like that. It's completely different from something that you experience in Europe. And exactly like these people. And that great sense of humor, that smart sense of humor. It's very unique. And for me, it was very inspiring because I really feel I'm free there. It's kind of the freedom that I really feel in that situation, and I couldn't experience it, this feeling anywhere. So because of that, I said I'm jealous. Everybody lives in Dublin. I really want to come back and charge my battery again.
Well, let's make all of that happen. Thank you so much for folks who asked questions, and thank you so much for these four amazing, powerful women to be here with us today. One of the goals of events like this that we're hosting throughout the diplomatic missions of Ireland and Canada is to increase the exchange between artists in Ireland and in Canada, and to promote more dialogue and more collaborations. So it's really one of my goals here as head of culture, and throughout all the ambassador and the consul generals throughout the country. So I want to thank you so much for this first very successful event. Thanks everyone who has been with us, and I will leave it like this. And thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
What happened?